we want to bring on one of the top experts in the country on campaign finance. He's co-founder of Change Congress, Professor at Stanford, Lawrence Lessig. Welcome back to the show, Professor Lessig. We appreciate it.
Great to be back.
Okay, now, first of all, before we get to the solutions, let's find out what the problem is. Why is Citizens United such a problematic decision?
Well, the problem we have right now in American government is that the vast majority of Americans believe money buys results. And that's because the vast majority of time that Congress is sitting, they're actually sitting twiddling to try to find ways to dial for dollars to raise more money to get back to Congress. This has become the obsession, almost an addiction of members of Congress, and the public sees it. And the public sees Congress behaving in ways that makes no sense except if you account for the large contributions they've gotten. So, for example, the fight over health care, Congress senators from states that wildly supported the public option, who opposed the public option, and happened to receive millions of dollars from insurance companies, sent the message to their constituents that it's at least probable that it's money and not principle that was guiding the result. So what Citizens United is going to do is just add another layer to that game. The case is just about independent expenditures by corporations. But what the court below had revealed in the evidence that they had taken is that often these independent expenditures are done with a wink and a nod. And so an ad will go up, and the first thing that happens is they call the candidate and they say, we just put this ad up, and the candidate is very excited about the ad because it's supporting the candidacy. So it becomes yet another way in which the members of Congress can bend over backwards to try to make another special interest or private interest happy, rather than worrying about the people they're supposed to worry about, which is their constituents.
You know, I want to get into the details of that a little bit. First, I want to know if I've got this right. These corporations these days are oftentimes multinational. Does the Supreme Court make a difference between an American company or multinational corporation that could be owned by someone else or even a foreign company?
No, they didn't. And that might be a distinction which later legislation can try to address, because this legislation just forbid the speech during a certain window before an election. It didn't try to draw a line between different kinds of corporations. But what the court did say is it didn't care that obviously many of the shareholders of the company wouldn't endorse the speech that the company's making, because obviously there are many, many shareholders and not everyone's going to endorse the same position. The court didn't care about that. What the court said is that the corporation decides to speak, then the First Amendment protects the right of that corporation to speak.
So if I've got this right, you remember the UAE port scandal that happened during the Bush administration?
Yep.
It wasn't really a scandal as much as a controversy. And the Republicans were very angry about that too. But under this decision, couldn't that UAE company come in and say, all right, well, I'm going to spend however many millions of dollars on your campaigns and buy your politicians?
The First Amendment apparently protects that right.
Now, how does that make any sense from a legal perspective when a corporation from the Middle East in that case, or it could be anywhere, it could be China, it could be Europe, when a foreign corporation has the same constitutional rights as an American citizen?
Yeah, again, it's not clear if the court will allow Congress to make a distinction on the basis of national origin like that. But what happened was just with a regular corporation is that midway through the 19th century, when the court was addressing the question of how to interpret the 14th Amendment that was enacted in 1868 in the United States, the court began to treat the 14th Amendment as extending protections to corporations. And initially, it wasn't actually a holding of the Supreme Court. It was actually just a reporter, and not like a newspaper reporter, but the person who records the arguments and records the opinions, who had put it in a note to say that the court was treating the corporation as a person. But then later, the court adopted that as its precedent. And then once you say this is a person, a legal person, then the question is why do you exempt the protections of the First Amendment from this person? Now, there's a very odd kind of slippery logic to that, because, for example, in the opinions yesterday, Justice Scalia made this point again and again. He said, obviously, the people who own the corporation have a First Amendment right, and obviously the people who can choose to associate together and form a corporation, so therefore the corporation has to have this First Amendment right. But, nobody would say, I have a right to vote because I'm a citizen, and I have a right to associate with other people, and so therefore my corporation has a right to vote, right? I mean, it's obvious that corporation doesn't get the right to vote merely because its owners have a right to vote. So similarly, there's no reason why the corporation has to have this right to free speech. It's just the court has chosen to extend the right to free speech to the corporation because the First Amendment is deemed to have a very strong protection, even for artificial persons, to make sure that more views get expressed in the political dialogue.
And Professor Lessig, I concentrate on that because it goes to the absurdity of the decision. It doesn't have to be a foreign company. The multinational corporations, I mean, IBM could be owned by, majority shareholder could be American or a set of Americans today. It could be the California Pension Fund. And tomorrow it could be Prince Al-Turki, right? So so would that mean that the decision would hold and so they could influence our elections if they're still a majority shareholder American, and then all of a sudden, a prince buys them, and then they can't influence the decisions? I mean,
well, it's an open question, and obviously, if the court were faced with a statute that tried to distinguish foreign ownership from American ownership, there's precedent in the Supreme Court for distinguishing the rights that extend to foreigners versus the right that extends to Americans. So that distinction would be an important, could be a distinction that the court would cut it back. But of course, the thing to recognize is that it doesn't matter. The problem is the same, even if it's just limited to American corporations, because again, what it's doing is just creating yet another way in which Congress will become dependent not upon the people, but upon these private interests.
We're talking to Professor Larry Lessig, and he's the co-founder of Change Congress. And Professor, did you switch over back to Harvard Law School now?
I did, just this summer.
Oh, okay. So you went from Stanford to Harvard Law.
Right.
So now let's talk about what we can do about it. Now we're in kind of a bad spot here, yet I still find myself a little hopeful. What's your plan? What do you think is the best way to approach this to get the power back into the hands of the people?
Well, I don't think that it makes much sense to try to take on the Supreme Court as in, let's find a way to get them to reverse themselves. I think we got to accept that this is the way the court views the First Amendment. But even though the Supreme Court defends the right of corporations to speak like this, there are a lot of ways in which we could establish a different system for funding campaigns that would change this kind of corrupt dependency. So, for example, there's a bill now in Congress. In the House, it's by Congressman Larson from Connecticut, the Democrat, and Congressman Jones from North Carolina, the Republican, the guy who invented freedom fries. And then in the Senate, Senator Durbin and Senator Specter. These bills would basically say you get a certain amount from the government as a grub stake to run a campaign once you jump through certain hoops. And then you can raise as much money as you want at $100 contributions or less. Now, the point is, if we had a Congress filled with congressmen who raised their money in that way, then whenever they did something stupid, whether anything you disagreed with, you might think it's because they're too liberal, or you might think it's because they're too conservative, or they didn't understand the issue, but you wouldn't think it's because of the money, because nobody could believe that that small level of individual contribution is going to affect or have any way of influencing a congressperson's decision. So the point is, we would establish the possibility of trusting the institution again, or at least trusting that the reasons it's doing what it's doing for something related to what it should be doing as opposed to the money. And I made that point today in a Huffington Post piece. I said that the one thing I don't think any credible person could believe is that the Supreme Court made its decision because of the money. It's not like it was being bought by anybody. But what the court's decision does is it basically means that Congress can't get the same kind of institutional integrity, because many people do wonder whether Congress makes its decisions because of the money. And the way to change this is just to change the financing system so that people can credibly take a position, even an unpopular position, and you'll think about why they're taking the position and won't attribute it to major contributors that they've been wooing.
So let me understand the process a little better. If the Larson bill goes through, let's say that we're in a local district, it could be anywhere, let's say it's Connecticut, and 100 people want to run in that district. How do we know which ones to give the public money to?
Well, the bill, and it's slightly different between the two bills, but the basic formula is you sign up a certain number of people, they've got to give you small contributions. You jump through to qualify, and once you qualify, then there's an initial amount of money you get, and then you got to continue to go through qualifying stages to get more and more money. So, the presumption is that you're not going to have 100 people who are going to be able to go through that qualification. And in any case, the amount of money that you're getting is also going to be directly tied to your ability to raise private money. So you're only going to get enough money to be really credible if you can raise a significant amount from private contributions, but it's all small contributions. So the point is, rather than having a campaign where what the candidate is doing is spending all his time in house parties, meeting with rich people who are going to give him $2,300, or bundle together a bunch of $500 contributions, they're going to have to appeal to the kind of $100 contributions, the kind of contributions that made the Obama campaign, for example, so successful. And that's going to change the character of campaigns and make it much more directed towards the people of a district rather than to these rich lobbyist fundraisers.
In the Larson bill, is the cap $100, so they have to collect from a great number of people $100 maximum?
That's right, $100 per citizen.
Okay, and are the rules in in that Huffington Post piece you cited Arizona, Maine, and Connecticut that do versions of this? Are those all roughly the same? Are they different? How do they differ?
You mean between districts?
Between Arizona, Maine, and Connecticut.
Oh, right. So they're basically the same, and they're not quite this bill. So all three of those states, Arizona, Maine, and Connecticut, are just states where you get a certain amount of money from the state if you opt in for the system, and you can't raise private contributions. And it's the federal bill that now adds the ability to also raise small dollar contributions, which I think the Obama campaign taught us that was very important, because when you contribute money to a campaign, you become much more committed to the campaign, much more eager to make it succeed, and that's an important part of the political process. We just don't want the contribution to be mistaken for an indirect bribe or a quid pro quo that's trying to get people to take a position they otherwise wouldn't take.
So the $100 caps it so that it's not a bribe, but you allow the $100 so that people are more committed to it, and it's a way of showing that this is a person that actually has support in the community.
Exactly right. I mean, this is the Supreme Court has said, and many people have criticized, but I actually think they're right to say that, in a certain sense, money can be speech, and this is the sense in which it is. If I give you $100, that says something about how much I support you, as opposed to if I just put a sign on my front lawn that says I support you.
And then once they make it through these hurdles and they are the official candidate in the race, at that point, does the government give equal amount of money to both sides?
No, this is the kind of complicated part of it. It's unavoidably complicated. There's a formula that basically determines the amount you get based on the cost of media in the districts. So, the media cost in New York City congressperson are going to be radically different from the media cost in a Utah race. So the amount that you're allowed to raise from the government changes depending upon that difference.
It makes a difference between Utah and New York, but does it make a difference between the Democrat and the Republican in the race in New York?
No, they both get the same amount.
So they both get the same amount. Can they opt out of the system or no?
Yeah, you can opt out, and this is again a product of the Supreme Court's jurisprudence, which would forbid this from being a mandatory system. So you're opting into this system, and when they ran it for the first time in Connecticut, which was just the last election cycle, 88% of the candidates opted into the system for the first time, which was an extraordinarily high percentage. So, if you get the numbers right, then many congressmen would certainly rather be able to run for Congress, spend their time doing the work of a congressperson, reading bills and debating, than sitting on a telephone dialing for dollars.
That leads to my next question, which is, can we sense? I don't know how long they've been in effect. Can we sense how effective they've been in Arizona, Maine, and Connecticut in getting to politicians that appear to be more responsive to the people rather than the lobbyists?
Well, I've actually seen a lot of work that's now trying to evaluate that, and it's still early to be able to have any good statistics about it. But one thing that is clear is that it changes the kind of person, or at least it introduces a more diverse range of people into politics than's possible before. And that's kind of obvious. You think I actually came close to deciding to run for Congress from California, and the thing that was just so striking to me is that every one of the advisors who I talked to about it said, you've just got to be willing to spend 3 to 4 hours of every single day, the first day you're elected until you're going to run again, on a telephone, calling people, trying to raise money. And you think, what kind of person wants to spend their life doing that? I mean, it's torture for most people. But if you could, serve as a member of Congress and not have to, do that, then obviously a different kind of person would be interested in running. And if you didn't have to have a whole bunch of rich friends or rich money yourself, then obviously people who didn't have a lot of resources could also think about running. So I always confuse whether this was in Maine or in Arizona, but one of these two states, one of the most important leaders on the welfare committee in the House was actually someone who, when this bill was enacted, had been on welfare and was a waitress at a restaurant, and then decided she was going to run for the legislature. And the point is, she could afford to do that because of the public funding ability.
That's interesting. All right, and finally, let's go to my ray of hope. Is there any chance that Citizens United is so egregious and that corporate money so swamps our elections coming up in 2010, 2012, et cetera, that people say, okay, no mas, I can't take it anymore. Maybe Professor Lessig has the right idea.
Yeah, I actually think that's going to happen. I think that the problem is so bad right now, and people are going to think this is just fuel on the fire. And we could actually get an opportunity to build a strong enough movement to make a change. And I think that change can happen in the legislature, but if the court stops it in the legislature, then I actually think there's potential to build a strong enough movement to try to bring about a constitutional change. But either way, this government is broken, and I think that's increasingly the recognition of people on the right and the left, and we're at a time when we've just got to get the resolution to fix it.
All right, if people want to find out more, they can go to change-congress.org. Professor Lessig, thank you so much for joining us on the Young Turks.
Thank you for having me.
All right, we'll be right back.